Welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast, featuring interviews and news about NIL. We also have special episodes to talk about recent news, events, and anything in the world of sports. The podcast is brought to you by Pliable, a full-service marketing company, an NIL agency that educates and empowers athletes to build their athlete brand. Now, here's your host, Greg Glynn.
Thanks and welcome to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. In this episode, we're talking about taxes. As athletes continue with NIL, it is a hot topic, and we are so excited that Sophie Miller has joined us today. She is a CPA from the Larson Company, which is based in Utah, and she is a retired college athlete turned CPA. She's got more than 8 years of experience. She's also, of course, been through the college sports experience and knows exactly what athletes are facing both on and off the field. Today, she's going to be talking about taxes and how to navigate that challenge, and especially with NIL, it is a very hot topic, as we've said. She's also done extensive research on strategies to specifically help college athletes with the goal of minimizing tax liability and helping them keep more of what they earn while setting them up for post-college success. That's my language. How are you doing, Sophie?
So good. Thanks for having me on, Greg. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about all this fun stuff. My two favorite passions.
and not many people are passionate about taxes, so I'm glad we found you, and you can help us out here today because this has become such a hot topic. And, sometimes I'm working with athletes and, they're very young still. They haven't had to deal with taxes. And all of a sudden they start making money, with NIL, and then the family, is figuring out, okay, well now how do we handle this, that our son or daughter is making some serious money, and we need to make sure we're filing our taxes. But that's why you're here, and you obviously have a very important background, not only in taxes, but as an athlete. So let's hear, as what I like to say, your athlete story.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I played volleyball at Eastern Washington from 2013 to 2016, graduated in 2017, had a great time. I'm not one to live in the past, but if I could go back to those glory days, I would in a heartbeat. I miss traveling. I miss having teammates. I miss just the camaraderie and, all the free gear is also really fun. All the stuff that comes with being a
student. The merch hall. So, you like the merch hall. The
merch hall was awesome. Played there for all 4 of my years. I started as a setter, and then they moved me to right side, and then they moved me back to setting. So I kind of just, was one of those kids that probably wasn't the best at one thing, but was pretty decent at a couple different things. And I feel like that's been my life story. I'm not great at one thing, but we can a jack of all trades, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the NIL and the taxes comes in here. So,
yes.
Back in the day, tell me, would you have been doing NIL?
I wish. I think that ideally, I would have some NIL money, but I don't know if I was cool enough. I studied accounting and I'm in tax. So these kids that are making good money on NIL, I'm they're way cooler than I could have ever been at any point in my life. So I would have taken advantage of it, but who knows if they would have let me. So
well, I think you're going to become pretty cool to these kids because you're going to help them with their taxes, which is something they need help with. So let's dive in on that. So how did you kind of find your way into becoming a CPA after, your college athlete career? Because I also like to hear that side of the story, because everybody's story when they're done is a little different.
Yeah, totally. So I studied accounting as my undergrad. I'm kind of a nerd. Went into college knowing that I either wanted to do accounting or engineering, and then found out that I do not have an engineering brain. So I decided to settle on accounting, kind of with the intention of being a bookkeeper, stay-at-home mom type of situation. And, I found some leaders and mentors in my early days that were no, you should go on and try and become a CPA. That's the most profitable venture within accounting. So graduated with my degree in accounting from Eastern, ended up going to Arizona State to get my master's in taxation, and then worked at one of the big 4 firms down in Arizona for a number of years before my husband and I decided to move to Utah. And then worked in industry for a little bit in Utah, or just an accountant at a resort here. and then found my way back to public accounting. And I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy you're here because we need to help these athletes. So first thing, let's start off today with you've got an athlete. They are now making more than $600. Let's say they've got 5 or 6, NIL deals. And if hopefully their school is supporting them or they have a good marketing agent, the conversation needs to come up about taxes. And no better time, obviously, than now as we record this episode in the month of April. So what would you suggest to that athlete who probably doesn't know what they need to do as far as taxes go, but they know that they should be doing something? What should be some of the first steps, whether it's, collecting certain paperwork, talking to a CPA, some of the things, maybe even it's talking to their parents first. You never know. Some of these kids are off at college and they're doing their own thing. And then the parents are like, well, you made money this past year? And they're like, yeah, I did. And so where should somebody start as an athlete saying, okay, time for me to do something. I don't know what I need to do.
Yes. And this is going to be a can of worms. I think that we'll just scratch the surface as much as possible. And if it starts a conversation, that is the best thing that we can do. But our first step in suggesting for athletes is to set up your LLC. And what an LLC is, it stands for Limited Liability Company. And so you can register with your state. You can use an attorney. Depends on, how much involvement you want to do, if you're nervous about making mistakes, kind of things like that. But what an LLC does is it gives you flexibility where you can either file as a sole proprietor, or in the future, if you're making more money, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you can file as an S corporation, which will save you on some self-employment tax. So when you're making money as a contractor, as a 1099, with brand deals, etc., there's a couple different taxes that you're subject to. Number one is income tax. That's your normal federal progressive rated income tax. If you file as a sole proprietor, you are subject to self-employment tax, which if you're a W-2 employee and you look at your W-2 at the end of the year and it has your wages and then it has, withholdings for income tax and then self-employment Social Security and Medicare. Social Security and Medicare make up self-employment tax. And when you're a contractor, you actually pay both halves of that. So it's a little over 15% on top of income tax that you're subject to. So anyways, having that LLC gives you some flexibility, whether you want to file as a sole prop, depending on how much money you're making, or move to that next step, being an S corporation and avoiding that self-employment tax portion.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of times athletes may say to themselves, because I've heard it before, do I need to do that? Am I making enough, to do that? When does the LLC kind of really start to come into play? If you had to make a suggestion, let's say they're doing 5 or 6 deals, they're maybe making $2,000, $3,000 a year, is it worth it?
Yeah, great question. I think an LLC is always worth it. So again, it stands for Limited Liability Company. And so that just provides a barrier between you and your business. So if you're operating solely under your Social Security number, there's some liability there, right? If you were to end up, in some sort of situation where you were being sued, they could come after you and everything you have. But if you're operating under that LLC, they can only come after the LLC and anything that owns. So I would say at any point, operating under an LLC, super smart move to do. Once you start making more money.
Yeah, let me ask a question there. What about the athlete that is doing some NIL deals, they're getting some product and services, and their total value is probably under $600 for the whole year? Is that somebody that should be thinking about an LLC?
Maybe not. It's what you think your time's worth. So probably above that, $5,000 range is probably more so, where we're an LLC.
That's good. That's good for them to hear because that's important. And obviously with the LLC, the other thing I talk about all the time is if you're going to do camps and clinics, now you've got risk. Now you've got somebody rolling an ankle. This isn't you just messing up on a social media post. This is now, okay, you've got some physical elements here. Your liability is a lot more. So if you're thinking about a camp or a clinic, I definitely think an LLC is the way to go.
Exactly. I think that is so smart. There's less liability when it comes to promoting a product or things like that. But yes, if you have kids that are being active, and you know how active kids are. Sometimes you don't get the most coordinated kids at your camp. So that totally makes sense as far as having that liability protection to hold you off.
Yeah. Now they create the LLC and they're doing this. Let's say they are 20 years old and they may have not filed taxes for the first time. What do they need to be thinking about or asking their parents? Because then there's all how their family taxes get filed as well and things like that, right? There's got to be some elements there.
Yeah, definitely. Talking to your parents about dependency status. So to be a dependent of your parents, if you're over the age of 18, you do have to receive support from your parents. So if you're supporting yourself primarily through your NIL, you're technically not a dependent of your parents. Even if you're in college, there does have to be like some level of support that they're giving you and whatnot. So yeah, just talking to your parents, like, are you claiming me as a dependent? Am I claiming myself? Things like that. And just keeping track of all the income that you make throughout the year. And income, a big part of this is not just cash. If you have a brand deal with some sort of product and they're sending you free product, I mean, that's technically income to you. And so they should issue you a statement at the end of the year, whether it's a 1099 or some sort of summary of like, hey, this is everything we provided you. MSRP total value was $1,000. That $1,000 is claimable as income to you. So just keeping track of all the goods that you've gotten throughout the year, whether it comes in cash or product, and then keeping track of your expenses too. So we always want to report all of our income. We never want to shirk that. But let's look at some expenses that you might not be taking, whether that's your cell phone bill, talking with different partners that you might have, or
your NIL marketing agent.
NIL marketing agent. Exactly. Any accounting attorney fees that you incur with all of this, mileage to and from events or meetings and whatnot. If you are, going into more camps that are specific to your sport, maybe not camps, but more training that's specific to your sport, making sure that we're keeping track of that to write that off to reduce that income so you can keep more of the save more on taxes in the end.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, I know that we're going to get back to the same type of conversation. This is starting to probably sound like some work for the athlete that may not be making, quote unquote, enough to make this worth it. And so how do we, quantify that? Is there, again, a threshold? Is there a number we should be thinking about? The other thing I think about, too, is if we're talking about MSRP, are we talking about anything under 600 is okay? Or is it any amount that should be being reported as well? I know there's a lot there to unpack, but.
Yeah, no, great question. Income, we always say, even if you don't receive a 1099 because you received $599, you should report that $599.
Yep.
Because it is, even though like documentation's not being sent to the IRS, let's say the company that was supporting you got audited and they're like, where'd this $599 go? And they said, oh, they gave it to Sophie Miller, but Sophie Miller didn't claim it. Now you're in trouble. So, we always report all of your income.
And where should they be if they're not
receive a 1099?
Yeah, so in my mind, the simplest thing is probably to have a spreadsheet. Basically what you're getting, in what you're paying out, and basically an income sheet, an expense sheet. Keep it on your phone. You've got the apps. Google Docs is great, simple, straightforward. And then you're saying that when the year comes to an end, which would be obviously for the calendar year, December 31st, that's when you probably take a look back at your records, think about things, talk to the parents, right? Would that probably be a good time to do that so you don't do that April 15th?
Yes, exactly. I think the earlier that you have an idea of how much you made, and on top of having like a spreadsheet, I probably should have added this to setting up your LLC. Once you have your LLC, or your EIN and all that stuff, if you decide to go that track, open up a business bank account. Use that business bank account for every transaction that you have, both income and expenses. If you need personal money to spend on groceries, rent, that type of stuff, transfer that to your personal account and then make payments out of there for personal expenses. But having that business bank account is also really helpful at the end of the year. You can go through and instead of being like, oh no, like I forgot this on my spreadsheet, it's all captured within that account of like money in, money out.
The only problem there, though, the other problem there, let's go back to our example of the value that came in product, right? Is that that's necessarily not on your bank statement. So ever more reason why maybe this little spreadsheet, I always use it to kind of cross-reference, right? Oh, did I get this? Did I not get this? They should, and that's why one of the things that Pliable does is creates a dashboard and a spreadsheet so you can actually see everything you made during the course of the year, whether it was cash or whether it was product. That is extremely beneficial to you as an athlete to have somebody actually tracking those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you said, with the non-cash transactions, that would have to be recorded outside of that bank account. So exactly, having a spreadsheet of like, what did I get? And then hopefully your partner is sending you stuff at the end of the year so you can cross-reference, like you said, I'm tracking this all. I have my bank account. Oh, and they sent me this. Did I include this in my total income number?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And so then what we're talking about here is anybody, in my mind, that is doing NIL should be reporting their expenses, even again, in a simple spreadsheet, because let's say you travel to a community appearance or an autograph signing, that whether it's, 5 miles away or it's 100 miles away, that is now something that you can have on your taxes as a write-off.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yes. Keeping track of all of that stuff. We've talked to athletes too about, if their little sister wants to do some social media management for them or something like that, paying her a slight wage, and maybe that wage or like 1099ing your sister can pay for her travel to come watch your games, So if she was going to pay to come and watch your games anyways, I shouldn't say little sister, it could be anybody in the family, but if a family member was wanting to come watch your games anyways, and you're able to take that as a deduction, and then they can use that money to come and see you play too, shifting income to lower income brackets. As far as like, if you're a high wealth NIL athlete and your sister doesn't have a job, we can shift some of that income to a lower income bracket. And then she can write off her cell phone and her home office and all that fun stuff. So trying to work the system a little bit as well. So stuff to keep track of is like travel expenses for family. Can we somehow work this into a management fee if they're helping support your NIL career?
Yep. No, that makes sense. All right. So then we've got that. Let's say we're getting toward tax time, which, everybody's going to start to get stressed out. I start hearing, from either the parents or the athlete, hey, where's this form? Where's that form? They need all this stuff. And you never want to wait to the last minute. So I always try to get it for the athletes well in advance. But sometimes, it does happen where a brand doesn't do it, or maybe it got sent to the wrong address, whatever it may be. What are some of the things an athlete needs to start collecting if they have a quote-unquote checklist of all the things they need as they get ready for tax time?
Yeah, great question. So those 1099s from brand ambassadors, from partners, anyone that's paid you money, if they're sending you a 1099, gather those all together. Hopefully you have that all recorded in your spreadsheet or on your bank account, whatever tracking method you have. And then expenses. The big question we always get is like, do you need every receipt as far as like a CPA goes? We don't need every receipt, but I would keep them just in case you get audited. That's like the big thing is to have that support, but we don't need to see every receipt. We just kind of need to see line by line, like this was my marketing line. This was my agent expense line. This was my mileage expense line, et cetera, et cetera. So getting all that stuff together, if you are on scholarship or, paying for tuition out of pocket, you should get a 1098-T from your university. Essentially shows you what your tuition was, if you had scholarships, all of that stuff. And then I think that's kind of about it as far as I can think of. If you did have a job, what athlete has time to have a job outside of their sport? If you do, awesome. But if you didn't have a job, over the summer.
Yeah, let me throw an idea at you, because I have a situation where this actually is occurring. Is an athlete may have a TikTok shop, and they are being paid by TikTok, which doesn't require a lot of their outside time, meaning they don't have to travel somewhere, have a job, but they are getting paid, and maybe that's not a 1099. That may be a different document, right? And so that would be no matter what that was, or if they may have been paid in a different way. Maybe it was a summer job that they had when they were doing something over the summer, because I know athletes are, as you said, extremely busy, especially during their school year, but sometimes they come home and they make some money when they do their summer job. And so what maybe should they be thinking about if they do have a summer job? For those of you who do have it, what do they need for that?
Yeah, great question. A W-2 should be issued to you. And again, I would check with your parents, because if it is a summer job, you might be using your home address as opposed to your school address. So is that document being sent to your parents' house as opposed to your house? Kind of a situation. So W-2s, 1099s, expenses, 1098Ts. If you are in the realm of investing, if you have a surplus of income and you're able to put that into either a brokerage account or something like that, you should be getting 1099s. There's different ones. So if you have interest income, you'd get a 1099 INT. Dividends would get you a 1099 DIV, or you just get a general brokerage statement that encompasses all of your transactions that happen during the year of your investment account. If you're investing into IRAs, if you're able to do that, then you should be receiving 5498s. Sometimes those aren't available until May, because you have until April 15th of the following year to put into IRAs. But yeah, be looking for transactions that you put into retirement accounts. If you have insurance, I know a lot of kids probably fall under their parents' insurance, but if their parents don't have it and they're required to have insurance and you have it through the marketplace or something, there's 1095s that you might be needing. I mean, the list goes on, Greg. I'm so sorry. There's
well, and then this leads to our segue, which is why you should be working with a CPA.
That's right.
So let's talk about what a relationship looks like with you, and how that gets started. So let's say I've got an athlete. They've made some money. Let's call it $2,000, $3,000, and they're looking for some help, and maybe their parents, quite honestly, might need some help as well. Sometimes I've found that, sometimes parents are also, haven't thought about this, yet. And all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more of an issue. What do they need to do? Do they reach out? How does a relationship start? Calls on Zoom? Calls, how does that work?
Yeah, great question. It's kind of your preferred method. We typically work over like phone calls and email. I try and not text too much, just because texts get lost so fast. Yeah. I'm terrible at responding to people via text, like my mom. So I never want to miss somebody's correspondence. But yeah, we deal a lot with people reaching out over email, people reaching out over phone calls. We do a lot of Zoom type meetings too, if you'd rather have face-to-face interaction, remote face-to-face interaction, and whatnot. And then, yeah, we just kind of go through your situation, like ask what your year's been like, what is your overall situation looking like, and then we can plan from there and see what you feel comfortable with. How much work do you want to do? How much work do you want us to do? Because that also determines the relationship as far as like cost goes and whatnot. So we were so happy to have those conversations of, this is what we can provide, and on the low end and the high end, and what we can work with and whatnot. And then that's like the initial meet and greet. And then around like November, December, we might reach out, or we'll have some sort of correspondence again, just to see like, what is your year looking like? And whatnot. So that's kind of how that relationship works. And then come to February-ish is when you should have all your documents. All 1099s, W-2s should be issued in the month of January. That's kind of the standing rule. And so February-ish, you can start sending us stuff over, and then we'll furnish a tax return. We'll send you off a draft, kind of let you know where you're at. And then with that, we also, the first year is a little bit hard because we may not have like estimated payments that were made. But if we file for you for 2025, we're getting to that deadline, then we can give you estimated payments for 2026 to get you on track of making those and whatnot. So that way we avoid interest and penalties, and you don't have a huge surprise bill come the following April. But yeah, so that's kind of the process. It's pretty fluid. Hopefully, we Yeah, have a good tracking system to make sure that, nothing falls through the cracks, and we get you everything we need. We'll send you over a draft of your return, see if you like the numbers. Then if not, like, let's work on some other stuff and see if we can drum up some other expenses for you.
Yeah, there you go. So then the other question becomes, okay, this sounds great. The athlete's like, I want to do this. And then they're like, well, how much is this going to cost me? So let's walk through just a little bit in general, terms, kind of what someone starting a relationship with you typically looks like from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, I will speak for Larson Company. I can't really speak to other CPAs. I know that there's other ones that charge more, charge less. So we'll just talk about Larson Company. We do have a minimum fee of about $700 per return, which might sound hefty, especially for those kids that are, or athletes that are making, under $2,000. That might be too much for you, and that's totally fine. I still think it's worth it to work with a CPA, and there's people that charge less than what we do, but we do provide a very excellent service. And we have, strategic planning to help you avoid if you are kind of in that upper echelon of income and whatnot. So if you have just a 1040 and you're operating as a sole proprietorship, you can estimate around like $650 for a return. And then if we end up making that step to an S corporation to avoid that self-employment tax, we typically have income thresholds before we suggest you moving there, so that way our compliance costs doesn't exceed your tax savings. We don't want you to be paying us more than you would have just paid in tax. And so if you do end up making that, normally we say around $40,000 net at the end of the year is when we would suggest you move to an S corporation. And so that would be a totally separate return. And so combined, $1,300 probably would be the rough estimate that I would give. It is dependent on how clean your information is. If we end up doing a lot more work, then we might tack on a little bit more just because we do bill hourly as well. But if we come with pretty clean stuff, if we've done the work in the back end to make sure everything looks good, then it should be a pretty fluid process.
And that's where my friends comes in the point about being organized with the spreadsheets of the income and expenses.
Who has time for that though, right, Greg? I mean,
you need a good NIL marketing agent,
That's right. That's right.
And then let's talk about the LLC, because I do think that is something that so many athletes should be doing and they just don't know. Is that something you can do, help them get set up with, and how much does that kind of cost?
That's a great question. So setting up an LLC, there are very distinct buckets as far as professional services go. So you have your attorney, lawyer, you have your CPA, you have your financial planner, and we have very strict guidelines on what we can and can't do. So setting up an LLC unfortunately falls into the attorney bucket, and that would more so be worked through them. But a lot of states, I will say, do have methods of setting up an LLC by yourself. So, if you need guidance on setting up an LLC, we can definitely kind of walk you through it. But we, as CPAs, are not allowed to dabble in law, and LLCs are more on the law side of things.
But you could connect them with someone who could help. You definitely
totally. Okay. Totally. We could give them all the resources. I have a client in Texas, and we sent them the website, and they asked us questions. We're like, yeah, no, you don't need this, you don't need that, don't worry. Okay. And that kind of all falls under the consulting bucket. Hopefully we can just get everything done for one price, and whatnot, all our meetings and all our prep, tax prep.
To throw a number out there for an athlete who's like, Greg, I need a number. What are we thinking for starting an LLC?
As far as our time.
Yeah, for them to pay an attorney to do that, or
an attorney,
the right person. Right.
That's a great question. I hesitate to throw out a number because I'm not positive, but I would say $200.
Okay.
Maybe. I know there's a little bit of a filing fee. Utah's $18 to set up an LLC. Different states might be more or less.
Different. So, yeah, they're all different. Yeah.
Yeah. There's.
Okay. Well, my point is, it's not $5,000 for those of you that thought this wasn't, something you could do. You know what I mean? This is very doable.
Yes.
This is very doable.
Totally.
Now, obviously, we've got a great partnership to be able to promote these wonderful tax services that you offer. Can you help across state lines? Is anybody able to work with you? That's an important piece here. And we've got all these people listening to your great advice, and they're like, I'd like to work with, Sophie. And then we're like, well, can they do that, right? They can work with anyone outside. Because I know sometimes with real estate agents or so many different agencies, they're only allowed to work in state borders. But can you, as someone based out of Utah, work with athletes across the country?
Absolutely. Yep. We have no limits as far as who we can work with and everything. I have clients out of Texas, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, primarily Utah, just because proximity, right? That's where we meet the most amount of people. Yeah. But yeah, no, we have clients all over, no limitation on who we can work with jurisdictionally.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that obviously being a former college athlete, Sophie did reach out to Pliable and was inquiring about helping with tax services. And I applaud her for that because she understands athletes and what you guys are going through right now, whether it's, male, female, whatever you guys are doing, whatever sport it is, it doesn't matter. If you think that this isn't worth it or it's not for you, this conversation today is meant for you to realize that there's a whole nother world out there that you need to be thinking about. And that goes also into the post-college career success route. The more you can learn about this stuff now, it's going to pay off long term. Right, Sophie?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the two things in life that are assured are death and taxes, right? You'll never escape these. So if you learn a little bit now, if you get in with a good CPA now to get this stuff going, and if they're able to help you plan so you can save more, so you can invest, so you can set yourself up going out of college. Like if your desire is to be a teacher and a coach, that's awesome. Like let's set you up now so financially you're not struggling later on, because I know teachers don't make the most amount of money, but like it's a big passion that people have. So, if you're able to make some money now to put away, if you're able to make money now to put away for your kids and their kids' kids, like let's work together to save you as much money as possible. I love athletes. I love the dedication that athletes have. I love how much passion is just like running through our veins. It's so much fun. And I just really want you guys to be passionate about setting yourself up for success, whether that comes from, getting an education for a career that's, will be profitable, or making a ton of money now. So that way, you can retire at 40 years old. Like, let's see what your plan is and let's get it done.
I love that. And that's the competitive spirit in you, Sophie, that I like. So that's awesome. Well, let's finish up with how people can get in touch with you, website, contact information, all that good stuff.
Perfect. Yeah, you can reach out to me via email, smiller@larsco.com. Larsco.com is our main domain. You can reach out there too and send in an inquiry about becoming a new client. You can reach us at 435-259-9100. Larson is on most social media accounts, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, if you want to reach out there too.
I was going to say, when do we get to see TikTok videos of you, Sophie?
Oh man. Once again, not cool, Greg. I'm not cool. I'm not the face of this company. That's for sure.
Well, you've done a great job with the podcast, and really appreciate the time. And thank you so much for enlightening athletes and supporting athletes in this way, and continuing to give back to the next generation. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This was awesome.
All right. Well, that has been Sophie Miller, and I am Greg Glynn. We're glad you could tune in, and stay pliable, my friends.
Thanks for listening to the Athlete Brand Advisor Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes from today's episode and catch up on recent episodes at pliablemarketing.com. Be sure to follow at pliablemktg on social media to follow athletes who have NIL representation and work with Pliable. Have an idea for our podcast? We encourage you to share topics and guest ideas by emailing our production staff at info@pliablemarketing.com. We love hearing from our loyal listeners, so jump in and be part of the podcast because, well, that's how we roll.